When experienced keyboard manufacturers bring their expertise to the world of leverless arcade controllers, we end up with something very interesting. We saw this with Doyle's HitPad series earlier this year, and today we're going to see what Varmilo has brought to the arena with their Fighting King 2. The cool thing about keyboard brands is that they know that it's all about the complete experience. The FK2 comes with a large, sturdy carry case included in the price. Not an add-on, not a premium bundle upsell, it's just there because Varmilo knows we're taking this to tournaments. The USB-C to A cable is a convenient 3 meters in length. It's not braided but has its own management system, which we will talk about later. Unlike some other brands, the included switch puller is very effective. It also comes with a prying tool for dismantling the chassis when we want to get up close and personal with the guts of this thing. It's starting off quite promising so far, but we're all here for the main event, the controller itself. So grab a snack, sink into your chair, and let's take a closer look at Varmilo's leverless offering and find out if this new challenger can take on the throne as the king of fighters. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Did you know that only 3% of you lot out there have subscribed? Whether you're new to the gang or a returning viewer, I want to introduce you to my little friend. Pick a number between 1 to 16 and if the ruby ball lands on your number, congrats, you're clicking the subscribe button, yay! If one of the silver balls land on your number, hit the like button for me, and if you don't get a match, just kick back and enjoy the rest of the video. Better luck next time. Just a quick thank you to Varmilo for sending this over. I do get to keep the controller, but they didn't give me any instructions at all, so opinions are my own. If you've already decided on this controller, use code VIDVADER for a 5% discount. There's a high chance you clicked on this video because of how unique this leverless controller looks. That seems like a good place to start this video. This colorway is called C Melody. The other variation that has art on it is called the Sakura, and I think that looks amazing too. It also comes in a sleek black and a plain blue or pink colorway without art. The design is hard coated onto the top of the case and has a spray painted look to it. I can feel it when I glide my fingers over the art, but it's not something that I notice during gameplay. I don't have especially oily or sweaty hands, so I don't know how it will interact with hand gunk. I won't expect it to rub off, but I'm not ruling out the possibility that something like that can happen with heavy use. But I can tell you it looks as good as the day I unboxed it. So my fidget has stopped spinning, let's quickly see what numbers we have here. Don't forget that ruby means a sub and silver means a like. Thank you, and let's get back to the FK2. This is a 14 button controller, so we have our standard direction buttons. The jump button is down here, our 8 action buttons are here, and there are an additional 2 buttons either side of the jump. The rims are built into the casing, which is aesthetically pleasing. I always like rims on my arcade controllers and they're gentle enough to not get in the way of slide techniques. The button caps are excellent quality. They're made with ABS plastic, so they're strong, smooth and nicely rounded. All of them are 23mm, including the jump button, which is usually larger on most other leverless controllers. They're never going to pop off accidentally during gameplay because of their proprietary design. I will show you why during the modding section. There's no wobble in the function buttons and they're made with the same material as the keycaps. The experience of pressing them feels solid and very tactile, but because they're smooth and rounded, they haven't caused any pain or fatigue in my fingers yet. Some people might not enjoy the stiffness, but this is the way I like function buttons to feel. The tournament lock is also quite solid. Putting it in lock mode will disable the function row to avoid disqualifications, because if you accidentally press these in a tournament setting, you forfeit the match. Just a quick note on compatibility. On the PS5 we get Start, Touchpad and Home. These buttons do nothing. On the Xbox Series X with a Brook XB1, I could only get Start and Power to work. I couldn't get a Home button to access the dashboard. The toggle also puts it into keyboard mode and gamepad mode. Gamepad mode is the setting for PS5 and Series X. On macOS I had to go into keyboard mode, and I'm guessing the same is true for PC. On keyboard mode the function buttons can be configured. Finally, there is a nicely disguised power light here. It's masquerading as a function button and looks very tidy when lit up. but if you're clumsy like myself, you might mistake it for a button during training. Now let's talk about this big, gorgeous body. It's a whopping 329 by 224mm and just shy of 27mm high. It's heavy at 1,400 grams, not as heavy as a traditional levered stick, but it's the heaviest leverless I've had on my lap. As you can guess from these specs, it looks and feels dense. For reference, this is the Kitsune. And this is the Hot 42M Plus. Just like the keycaps, it's made with ABS plastic. It's heavily chamfered on all four sides, and there are no sharp edges here. I love how the curves and slopes come together with the rims, the textured art, and the rounded buttons to create depth. It all comes together coherently and looks fantastic from every angle. I'd go as far as calling it pretty, and it sparks joy every time I look at it. We can see a lot of thought has gone into making it functional and good looking around the back as well. The USB socket is here, and this triangular gap allows plenty of space for your fingers to have a feel around for the right spot when you're plugging in. From there, the wire can go in either direction along these grooves, or it can go straight up. The side exits work best if the controller is on a flat surface, because the wire can flop out near the edge. If you choose to go straight up, the cable comes with a rubber clip to fill in this gap. Its purpose isn't to keep the cable sitting flush, it's there so that if the cable is accidentally tugged, the clip will block the cable from coming out. Any direction you choose will help to minimize the chance of damaging the USB socket from the weight of the cable. The full-sized rubber base is soft and grippy. It feels great on my bare legs, and it's deceptively sturdy and hard to rip. I'll explain why in the modding section later. I'm not certain, but this info panel looks and feels like aluminium. Finally, there's a drop on the edges here, and together with the chamfering at the front, makes it very convenient to pick up from flat surfaces. Everything about this build is designed with purpose and precision, and they didn't sacrifice aesthetics to achieve this. Physically, it's a perfect 10. Now I have to talk about this carry case. This thing is the real deal. It comes as standard with the controller, so it's not an upsell or extra charge, it's part of the package. They put a lot of thought into this carry case as well. It's sturdy on the outside and double zipped for convenience. On the inside there's a netted pocket and then a safety flap with padding to keep the controller and tools in place so they don't go jumbling around loosely. We can release this flap with the Velcro strap, and these softly lined compartments are where we contain everything. There's also a gap here so we can get a good grip and lift on the controller. Now that's all well and good already, but the carry case serves an additional purpose beyond storage and protection. There's a clever seat built into the front of the case, and if you look carefully, it's sloped. So the controller can sit on this as an alternative height and angle setting. That's clever. The Varmilo FK2 uses an in-house PCB and software. It has a 1000 Hz polling rate, which means it's sending data 1000 times per second to avoid missed inputs, and it has a response speed of 5 milliseconds or less. Going by feeling, it's responsive enough for me, and I didn't notice any lag even when using it through the Brookwingman on the PS5. By the way, this is not a GP2040 controller like many of the other controllers I've previously reviewed on this channel. That is a good and bad thing because a lot of us are familiar with the powerful GP2040 software, but it also means that Varmilo can implement their own interesting features. The web configurator only works with Windows PC. I tried getting it to work on my Mac and a virtual machine, but neither of those detected the controller, so here I am with a borrowed laptop. I'm not going in depth with the options on this video, I just want to show you the two sections that are most interesting. First of all, the SOCD options are very robust. If you're not familiar with SOCD rules, the gist is that tournament regulations don't allow some inputs to be processed. So for example, in Street Fighter, if you press both left and right at the same time, it has to process as neutral and not left or right. Most controllers have around 3 different modes you can choose from, but the FK2 allows you to mix and match these input processes to your liking. And that's what we're looking at right now. So in theory, the controller should cover every tournament regulation now and in the future. This is the other interesting option available. You can change the actuation of the switches at a per button basis. So we can set the button to only do something when it hits a certain point, and we can set the release distance on the way back as well, so that it only turns off when it reaches the required height. There are 4 modes available, so you can mix and match your buttons to be set to any of the modes. By default, all buttons are set to mode 3, which is one of the rapid trigger modes. My small brain doesn't fully understand the rapid trigger mode, but it seems like it allows the switch to deactuate without completely returning to the top, and the deactuation distance can be set from 0.2mm to 0.8mm, so you don't have to fully let go of the button before going for another press. The Fighting King 2 isn't just about the looks, it's got some cool things going on under the hood as well. To open this up, we have to first remove these screw covers. There are sections cut out of the rubber pad, and even after taking them on and off several times with a sharp tweezer, they didn't rip and kept their stickiness, so don't ever throw these little things away. A standard Phillips screwdriver should work here, and I used a 4.0 screw bit for reference. There's a prying tool packed in with this controller, but I didn't want to accidentally scratch the body. So I went straight to the next step and placed both thumbs on the edge buttons, gripped the edge of the controller with my fingers and pushed until the top plate popped off. One thing I noticed is that the button holes are lined with these tiny plastic bits. I'm not sure if this is a manufacturing quirk or an intentional design choice. It could be that they're designed to stabilize the keycaps and minimize wobble, but I don't have the facts on this one. Anyway, with the top plate off, we can see Varmilo's keyboard roots here because the FK2 is already pre-modded with foam. This is a popular mod in the keyboard world to limit and dampen internal sound waves to achieve what is known as a thocky sound. There are 2 pieces of foam in here, so if it's too damp, we can remove one or both of them to swing over to the clacky side of the spectrum. The keycaps will be hard to replace since they are fully bespoke to this controller. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I've never seen keycaps like this anywhere else. The reason they can't pop off is because the base is spread out and is wider than the buttonhole, creating a blockage. I tried putting a Hot 42 keycap on this and it did work with the switch, but it sat much lower than the stock keycaps. I don't believe they will be that comfortable paired up with this. Now the switches are quite interesting. The reason this controller is so thick is because it uses MX switches. The stock ones are Cherry MX Inductive Silvers. They don't have pins like the usual MX switches, so they slip right off with very little risk of damaging the PCB during extraction. I'm not going to attempt to explain how inductive switches work because I'm not smart enough to understand that stuff myself. I just know that the internal mechanisms use non-contact magnetic processes for activation. This is exciting, cutting-edge technology in the world of keyboard switches. So that unfortunately means there are no alternatives I can buy for experimentation. The Varmilo FK2 is one of the first products in the world that uses induction switches right now. According to Varmilo, the induction switches are necessary for the rapid trigger feature I mentioned earlier, and they're rated for 200 million presses, ideal for the durability required by fighting game enthusiasts. Another interesting thing about this controller is that they've used the proprietary keycap to control the travel distance on these MX switches. The button caps have small blockers built into them so that they don't fully depress and rise to the top. It's like constantly holding the switch down slightly so that it's always close to the actuation point. It's a really cool way of combining the technology of full-sized inductive switches with a low travel distance. So what we've discovered by opening the FK2 is that we can choose our amount of foam and we can potentially change the switches when they become available in the future. I've been using the FK2 for a while now, and I found that I'm not the biggest fan of how Cherry MX silver switches feel, because I like my switches heavy, and silvers are even lighter than red switches, which are already too light for my taste. I do enjoy the feeling of the switches more when I bash on the buttons though. It's definitely built for hard play, and striking it helps to mask some of the lightness that I'm not a fan of. Also, I prefer a creamier sound from my button presses, like this. The good news is that the FK2 sounds thocky, and they were able to eliminate any metallic pinging noises from the sound profile, which is impressive. That keyboard setup you just heard costed me more than £500, and even that has an annoying ping. If you require silence from your controller, this doesn't quite hit the mark. In fact, to my ears, the sound is quite loud and loose. But I think this is again mostly attributed to the Cherry MX Silver switches. Despite that, I still think this is a very good foundation that I can build upon later when more switches hit the market. It's already got the foaming inside, it's already weighty and densely built. It just needs some switch options. The button spacing is amazing for smaller hands, and I want to offer a quick tip. I like to use my thumb for this X button here, which is my light kick on Street Fighter 6. The spacing and sensitivity of the buttons means that I'm always pressing this by accident. So if your leverless form is similar to mine, you probably have to make adjustments either in your play form or through the web configurator. But do you remember the key travel setting I showed you earlier? Well, that came in handy because I changed mode 2 to activate at a lower point and placed that mode 2 setting on this button. Since making that change, I haven't had any accidents. Now I have to purposefully push it to get my drive impact going. I've never been much of a fan of this button on other controllers, but it's so easily accessible to me now that I've already incorporated it into my bindings. The spacing on the FK2 is closer together than the Hot 42 R16 spacing, which is a spacing a lot of people enjoy. And for reference, my hand is 7.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So to summarize these points, I like how the FK2 performs. It feels fun to bash, it's very responsive during play, and the intricate changes for switch actuation have already become useful to me. And I'm usually not the kind of person that tinkers with settings like this. The sound and feel of the stock switches are not to my taste, but the controller is built on a great foundation, and I believe other switches will perform very well in this body. For this comparison, I'm going to match up the FK2 with a couple of other leverless controllers that are similar in size and not in the acrylic sandwich category. This is the Razer Kitsune. It's made of aluminium, so the chassis is nice. It's a lot lighter than the FK2, which is the intention of the Kitsune. It's meant to be portable and easy to move around. You can pick this up with one hand, no problem, but it doesn't come with a carry case, and for a recommended retail price of £299, that's quite disgraceful. It has a cable locking mechanism too, which is well designed, but flimsy. The big advantage with this controller is the native PS5 compatibility, so it will run on the PS5 without a dongle and will be compatible for the rest of the PS5's life cycle and possibly through to the PS6. This is the Hot 42 M16 Plus. Its chassis is made of aluminium and it feels robust and dense. It's about the same price as the FK2 at £97 after tax, but it benefits from AliExpress free delivery. Varmilo delivers to my country via DHL only, and it costs £53 to get it delivered, but it did arrive on my doorstep in 2 days. 2 days from China to the UK. That's black magic insanity. It also requires a dongle to work on the PS5, but it has the port for the dongle on the controller body, which is what I prefer. Anyway, I really like the M+, it's my current daily driver after I swapped the switches to wind engines. The stock switches were low profile Kale crystals, the Kitsune uses low profile reds, and they feel similar to the silvers in the FK2 with slight variations in actuation force. The FK2 has the lightest switches of the three in my opinion. If you like the way this controller looks, you're not wrong about that. It looks amazing. Hands down, the best looking controller I have owned in the 30 years I've been gaming. Wait. Hands down, the best looking leverless fight stick I have owned, or at least the most interesting looking one. At a time when most leverless controllers are going for something edgy and slick, Varmilo decided to carve their own path and bring out something whimsical and fun. The looks aren't for everyone, but if you want something with its own brand of cool, this hits the spot. I think it's excellent that Varmilo is looking ahead by using latest switch technology. Even though there are no alternatives right now, owning the FK2 means you're ready to experiment when manufacturers get to grips with this new style of switch and start to release their options in the coming years. Just a caveat though, I'm not sure how that situation will play out, so in the worst case scenario, we'd be left with Cherry MX Silvers in this controller. Whether that's good or bad is up to your taste. I've tried a lot of leverless controllers these past few months and I have a couple more to look at before we wrap up 2024. But this is already up there with my favourites of the year. So who is this controller for? It's for players who enjoy large, heavy, well-built controllers, for players that want next level control over switch actuation, gamers that want a convenient storage and travel solution included in the price, and those who enjoy great aesthetics. Varmilo's brand slogan is Keyboard Artist. I can confirm they live up to this slogan because the Fighting King 2 is simply a work of art. Thanks for joining me for today's video. If the FK2 sounds interesting to you, please use my links below and don't forget to use code VIDVADER for a 5% discount. Let me know what you think about this controller. Let's discuss the aesthetics and the potential of induction switches. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you joined in on my fidget game earlier, and if you want to binge the other controller reviews I've made, click on this playlist.